Hi guys, Goffy here and welcome back to the channel. In today's video, I want to talk about what for me is the best camera that Fujifilm have ever made. Now best is definitely subjective and it depends an awful lot on what your requirements are from a camera. And my requirements aren't that demanding really. I tend to do travel, landscape, with the occasional portrait kind of photography, so I don't need the world's most amazing specs. And that leads me to this camera. This camera is the Fujifilm X-Pro2 and it has just turned 9 years old, and for me, this is my favorite camera that Fuji have ever made. And in today's video, I want to tell you why that is, go into a little bit of detail on how this camera holds up in 2025, and ultimately what I'd quite like to see in a future X Pro 4. But let's jump into why it is that I love this camera so much. So why is it then that the X-Pro2 is the camera in the Fujifilm lineup that I've enjoyed using the most? Now for me, this is a camera that has all of the good things about Fuji all in one place without some of the more gimmicky features that the newer cameras have brought along. Now for me, the design and build of this camera is its biggest appeal. Because of the rangefinder-esque styling, I find it an absolute joy to use and actually makes me want to go out and take pictures, which is always a big win. Now one of the features that are very Fuji, and this camera has it, is this optical viewfinder. The combination of an optical and EVF viewfinder is something that I get an awful lot of fun out of, and I'm a pretty 50-50 split in terms of where I'm using the optical finder or the EVF. I actually find myself using both in different scenarios, but having that optical finder as an option is something that I get an awful lot of enjoyment out of. The other thing as well when it comes to the design of this camera is just how well it's built. The build quality of this camera feels amazing. It genuinely feels solid. This is a 9-year-old camera that in many ways looks brand new, and it doesn't feel like it's aged at all when it comes to the buttons and controls on the camera itself. And I do think in some of the more modern Fujis, like the X-T5, it feels like the materials have actually taken a bit of a dip. I think the X-T5 materials feel slightly worse than the X-T4, whereas this thing feels very, very solid. Another thing as well with these older cameras, especially this sort of generation, I think the colors coming out of this camera actually look better than some of the modern cameras. Now don't get me wrong, the modern cameras, the newer sensors, definitely have things like more dynamic range, they're better in low light. And to be honest with you, I think the colors are a little bit more true to life, but the colors coming out of this camera I think look great. Applying my presets to the raw files out of this camera, I think they look that little bit better than some of my other cameras that I've been shooting with. Overall, what we end up with is a package that actually inspires me to go out and shoot. It is a mixture of all of the good things about Fuji coming together in one place that makes me feel that way about it. Now you might be sat there thinking to yourself, well, if you think the X-Pro2 is the best camera Fujifilm have ever made, then, well, surely it should be the X-Pro3 because that's just the X-Pro2 but better in every way. And you'd be somewhat right to think that, but also somewhat wrong. Weirdly, Fujifilm dropped one of my favorite features on the X-Pro2, on the X-Pro3, and that's the dual mag optical viewfinder. My favorite focal length, if you know this channel, is 28mm full frame, or 18mm when it comes to Fuji on these crop cameras. And if you buy an X-Pro3, even though that viewfinder I think is bigger and brighter, they chose a single magnification that doesn't cover the 28mm focal length. So you can't actually use the optical finder and this lens, which is for me a big deal breaker. You can change the magnification of the viewfinder by holding this little lever on the front, meaning you can support more lenses on the X-Pro2. So if I want to shoot my favorite focal length, I don't actually have a choice. The X-Pro2 ends up being the answer for me. When it comes to the X-Pro3, I also didn't like the reversed rear screen on the back. If I don't want to see the screen on the back of here, I just need to click view mode to turn the LCD off, and I've basically achieved the same thing. But when I do want a screen, because a screen is helpful a lot of the time, then I can just turn the screen back on the back. If you are looking at an X-Pro3, a quick word of advice, if you are looking at buying one used, check the ribbon connector when you fold down the screen that you can see through the little hinge. They're known for breaking, and when they break, it's an expensive repair. I think there was actually a bit of a lawsuit carrying out in the US over that ribbon connector in the screen. Just give it a little look and make sure it looks okay if you're thinking of picking up an X-Pro3. Now, another question that you might have, quite rightfully, about a 9-year-old camera is, does it actually stand up in 2025? Is it still usable, or is it really starting to show its age? Now, I think in the world of flagship cameras, especially in the video and autofocus space, camera tech has moved on a lot in the last 9 years. If you were to take an X-T2 or X-T3 and compare it to an X-T5, when it comes to video features and autofocus, the difference is very stark. But when you move on to cameras that are predominantly not used for video and not really used for things like wildlife and sports, and are used more for things like travel photography, portrait and street photography, I'm not convinced the world has really moved on that much at all. I think one of the major things that you will still notice is the autofocus in continuous autofocus and on quickly moving subjects clearly isn't up to par anymore. But how frequently do you actually find yourself doing that? During my entire time in Weymouth, I didn't need autofocus capabilities beyond this thing once. If you're taking portraits, we've still got eye autofocus here. As long as your portrait or whoever you're taking the picture of is staying pretty still, the eye autofocus is more than usable. If they were moving around, I'm not sure I'd trust it. But honestly, I never really find myself in that situation. We've also got 24 megapixels. Well, that's not really aged all that badly at all. A lot of cameras are still released today with 24 megapixels. I can definitely tell the difference between this and my Leica M11 at 60 megapixels, but not to the point that it really hinders anything that I'm doing. And I think importantly for me, this camera, a bit like my M11, sits in a lineup of other cameras. If I really need something like a really long lens for some wildlife, or I really need to shoot some fast moving subjects, this just isn't the camera I'll pick up. But for my general needs, like an everyday camera, street photography, portraits, landscapes, this genuinely has everything I could ever need. And yeah, in my 3 days in Weymouth, of the images that I'm showing you today, I didn't once wish that I had a feature that this camera doesn't have. For me, 9 years later, this camera is still extremely usable today. If I was to be completely honest though, there is one thing that I miss, and that is the newer Fujifilm simulations and JPEG settings. I really enjoy messing around with the Fuji recipes, and this camera is old enough that it doesn't have some of the newer simulations, so I can't use some of the newer recipes and set them up on the camera. And I do miss that because I like messing around with them and then sharing them here on the channel. And I do feel like every time I take the X-Pro2 out, that I can't mess around with new recipes like I could if I was to take out something like an X-T5. Now, I know a lot of people will also moan about the cost of used Fuji cameras. Now, I think I was pretty lucky when I picked this camera up. I paid £650 for this camera 2 years ago, and that included the original box and all the accessories, and also an additional 2 batteries as well. So for £650, I think this is a pretty good pick up. And I think if you go and have a look on places like eBay, you'll see £1,000 versions of this camera and think to yourself, that is the price they sell for. They just don't sell for £1,000 anymore. I have set up some watches on eBay more recently and on Facebook just to see if cameras still pop up at relatively good prices, and I have seen a few appear with a price starting with the number 6. So you can definitely pick these cameras up still for £600 and something if you keep an eye out and know how to play the game when it comes to used cameras. So next up then, let's talk about the X-Pro4, because I'd be super interested to know what you guys want from an X-Pro4 as well. So let me know down in the comments, but for me, I think this is my little wish list. I really hope that the optical viewfinder covers off the 18mm or 28mm focal range, because for me, that was a bit of a deal breaker with the X-Pro3. I don't mind if it's a dual mag or a single mag, just please cover off 18mm. Whilst we're at it, please can we update the EVF? The EVF is showing its age a little bit, not that bad, but it would be just nicer to review some images on that EVF if it had a bit of a higher resolution. I guess we could wish for the XH2S sort of resolution. I think we'll likely get more like an XT5 resolution in there. Then we get to the screen on the back. I hope that we get a tilt screen like the XT5. I don't want a flippy screen because no one's going to be vlogging with this camera, and I also don't want the reversed gimmicky screen of the X-Pro3. Just give me a normal tilt screen and that will make me happy. I think internally, I would quite like IBIS. I can't see why they wouldn't give it to us, given that the X100V has IBIS. And when it comes to the sensor, I think really there are 2 choices. You can either hope that we're going to get the XH2S sensor, 26 megapixels stack sensor, really good for video and high-speed shooting, which doesn't really feel like it fits the whole X-Pro ethos, or you can hope that we're going to get the 40 megapixel sensor that we've seen in the XH2, XT5 and X100V. I think given the choice, personally, I'd quite like the 40 megapixel sensor. It's likely to keep the price down a little bit, and I think I'll get more benefit in a camera like this from 40 megapixels than I would in the X-H2S of having faster shooting speeds and maybe slightly better low light. So I think ideally I would like basically the X100V loaded into this thing, 40 megapixels and IBIS. And I think for me, what I would really like to see in a camera like the X-Pro4 is for Fuji to increase the amount of options that we get in the JPEG settings. That is something that would genuinely excite me about picking up a new Fuji camera, if we would get things like proper controls of the tone curve. Think how amazing that would be if you could bake that into your JPEGs. Or even give us like the HSL sliders. Let us change the hue, the saturation, and the luminance of individual colors so that we can increase our flexibility over JPEG files. It would massively open the whole world of making more recipes on these cameras, because it does feel like we've kind of got to a point where just about every good recipe has been made, and most recipes that you play around with now are just a slightly different variant of one you've already used. So that would be the thing that would really excite me. Drop the X-Pro4 with some nice cool features, hardware-wise, but also give us some software features for even further manipulation of our JPEGs. And if you also release it alongside a new 18mm f2, I'd also snap that up immediately. Give this slightly better autofocus, make it weather sealed, and I would be all over a new small 18mm lens as well. That's what I would love to see from an X-Pro4. Let me know what you would like to see, especially if you disagree with me as well. I'd love to hear it down in the comments. So in conclusion then, if you couldn't tell, this is another one of these cameras that I absolutely love. For £650 I paid for it, I still think it's one of the best cameras out there regardless, but for me, this is all of the really good things about Fuji in one place, without all of the gimmicks that we've seen in some more modern cameras, like reversible screens and simulation dials. It's kind of devoid of all of that, and instead, it's everything for me that's good about Fuji. It's a camera that I love to pick up and take out and use, and its build and design encourages me to take it out. Even though I've got a Leica M11, an M10 mono, this thing still lives in my collection because of how much I enjoy using it. And I think that says just about everything you need to know. I've got some cameras that should, in theory, completely take the space of this thing, but they don't. I still enjoy using it, and I thought I took some pretty cool pictures this weekend. Hopefully you agree as well, and hopefully you've also enjoyed this video. And if you have, please do not forget to like and subscribe, and hopefully I'll see you guys in the next video. Cheers!